Imagine doing an emergency drill to prepare for war. Well, that's what the people of Taiwan do every year. It's called the Hangguan, and it combines civil defence drills with military exercises on land, sea and air. This year, it was the largest and longest in 40 years as Taiwan ramped up its defence against possible invasion from China, amid reports that China has been scaling up its own military.
China has launched large-scale military drills in the waters around Taiwan to deter the self-governing island from seeking independence.
The Chinese People's Liberation Army, who released this footage, said its navy, army, air and rocket units are practicing for precision strikes and a blockade of the self-ruled island. Taiwan quickly responded, sending its own aircraft and ships to the 180-kilometre-long strait.
In another phase of, I think, a significant change the way the Chinese maritime forces operate and behave.
Former Prime Ministers Helen Clark and Sir Zhong are among a raft of current and former world leaders who have appeared at China's largest military parade in the capital, Beijing.
The military parade provided rare insight into the range of weapons now powering China's People's Liberation Army, including hypersonic missiles that could threaten U.S. ships, giant lasers to blind pilots, and underwater drones that look like submarines.
I'm Sharon Brett-Kelly. Today on The Detail, I'm in Taiwan to find out why this small island is so important to China and the US, and what it is like to live with the threat of invasion.
Particularly the war in Ukraine changed the way that Taiwanese think about a potential invasion, and people began doing a lot more preparation. I know some nurses in their spare time will attend training courses on how to dress bullet wounds.
We'll hear more from Kiwi Mark Hansen, who's been living here for 20 years. Also, analysts from Ukraine and the US, and the warnings to New Zealand to sit up and take more notice.
Before China invaded, we'll think about that international society respond to their action.
First, I'm at a Taipei think tank, the Institute for National Defence and Security Research, where Dr. Ming-Shih Shen explains the worst-case scenario under Chinese leader Xi Jinping.
Worst-case scenario is Xi Jinping want to be the great man, and he see that unify Taiwan is a historical mission, and then he will invade Taiwan.
And what does that worst-case scenario mean for Taiwan?
It means that because China have a very strong military power, and then if Xi Jinping decide to invade Taiwan, we cannot win alone. So this is worst case scenario. So we need international support. We need ally country to help Taiwan to fight against the dictator.
I'm in Taiwan as part of a week-long trip for a group of journalists from around the world, funded and organised by Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Will you make it just with the United States, or you need other allies?
Of course, including the NATO, including United States, including the so-called Quad, Quad 4 country. This is very important because I mentioned about Taiwan value. It's connected to the Indo-Pacific area value and, of course, the global value.
Village. I know it won't happen tomorrow, but are you confident that you do have that international support?
Yes, if it happens tomorrow. The first one is I don't think Xi Jinping will decide to invade Taiwan tomorrow. The second one is after our defense reform and our military drill and exercise, and especially in our mobilization system reform and exercise. I think if Xi Jinping want to invade Taiwan and close 3 days or a week, it's impossible.
Are Taiwanese people ready for it, though?
Yes. You can see in Taiwan we have some civilian organization to teach Taiwan people how to survive during the wartime. For example, Kuma Academy. And then some civilian organization, they try to open some course to teach people how to survive during the wartime, how to protect your family. And this course is very popular for for Taiwan people, especially for women. Yeah, because women say we will not accept the military training, so I need to learn something to protect my family, to protect my home.
Survival.
Survival, yeah.
What are they being taught?
Of course, it's not military training. It's how to identify the spy espionage and how to identify the fake news or information campaign or operation, and then how to help yourself if you're wounded or your family wounded or something like that.
So what's in Taiwan's arsenal? Well, here's defence analyst Dr. Zhong speaking at that same meeting through an interpreter.
So basically, we have our self-produced fighting jet, IDF. It can not only be used for our air defense, but it can also carry our indigenous missiles. So it can be used to attack the coastal areas of mainland China.
How many different countries are you working with on the supply of military hardware and technology?
特别是完整的武器系统，比如说战车。
Well, primarily our military equipment comes from the United States, and because the U.S. sells us the comprehensive weapon systems, including the tanks and the anti-missile systems. For the European countries, they provide only technical support or some components in the military equipment, but till this day, they do not sell us any holistic or comprehensive military system yet.
How much do you spend on defence, and is it increasing?
According to what President Lai mentioned or announced earlier, by 2030, Taiwan would spend at least 5% of its GDP on our national defense. 5% of GDP would translate into 1.8 trillion NT dollars, which is a number doubled from the number that we have now.
Since the arrival of President Lai, does the Chinese military operation increase?
从实际的状况来讲，确实有升温。
So in fact, we can see or feel the rising tensions in the Taiwan Strait. I will provide a very simple example here. So before 2024, before our presidential election, there were about 4 vessels stationed nearby Taiwan Island. But after our general election in January 2024, we can observe or identify 7 to 8 vessels stationed around the Taiwan Straits.
7 to 8, so it's doubled.
7 or 8, yes, doubled.
2024, the number of warships has doubled?
Yes.
Do you worry that ordinary Taiwanese people don't take the threat of China seriously enough?
其实我不认为耶，因为在这几年。
Well, I don't think so. In fact, more and more Taiwanese people actually come to us and ask when would a potential invasion be, or how the scenario would be like, or how to respond as a citizen to this potential invasion. So in my personal view, I think the public awareness of the war is increasing.
As you heard there, Taipei plans to nearly double its current defence spending by 2030 to 5% of GDP, roughly 100 billion New Zealand dollars. But everyone I've spoken to agrees that is no match for China's military might. At a cafe on a busy Taipei street, I meet Ukrainian defence researcher Yurii Poita, who has been watching the situation for several years.
Their military build-up is tremendous. The Chinese preparing for this, and China is preparing very quickly. So China builds up to 20 warships every single year. And China has planned to increase 3 times the number of their nuclear warheads. So they are definitely preparing for invasion. Whether or not invasion happens, I don't know. No one knows. And if they prepare, it means that the probability, likelihood of using this is growing as well. And in some dimensions, they already are more superior over United States in the region. In
How
some
do you
dimensions.
know that?
So there are many reports. For instance, there is Pentagon reports about the capacity of People Liberation Army. American think tanks, they assess whether or not People Liberation Army is ready in any dimensions. There are many roundtables, closed-door discussion, open-door discussion, conferences, etc. So, for instance, you can just count the number of warships of PLA Navy, and they are much more than United States warship in the region. Another dimension in the number of Chinese aircraft in the region, and they are much more than the number of aircraft of United States, Taiwan, and other allies here. And another one is the number of Chinese anti-ship missiles and their capacity in space and the skills of their military troops. So there are some dimensions that China is already very successful.
Right.
So the question is whether or not Chinese leadership consider PLA, People Liberation Army, is ready. We don't know this. And the second question is whether or not they consider that the time is right for possible invasion. So dominant perception here, and with United States, in United States expert circles, is that PLA is not ready yet.
Not before 2027.
The dominant perception is that they won't be ready yet. But at the same time, they don't exclude this possibility that political leadership, due to some reason, will decide to start any actions.
Yeah.
But still, the Chinese aggressiveness is growing, for sure.
Okay. First of all, if you say who you are.
Sure. Kelly Sloan. I'm a columnist with Colorado Politics in Denver, Colorado.
So we've been here a week and we've had a lot of meetings with government agencies or government-funded think tanks,
Right.
I think. You know, a very full week. And you know the Taiwan story well. What is your feeling? What's the likelihood, do you think, that China will invade Taiwan?
I think the likelihood approaches 100%. Now, I think the question is when, not necessarily if. I think the date 2027 has been talked about since I was here last time in 2022. As long as the current regime is in power in Beijing, it's always going to be on the table, and I think that's ultimately their goal is they look at it as repatriating Taiwan. Everybody else in the world thinks of it as taking Taiwan. Now, what that looks like, I think is the big question. Right?
What's your
I think it's going to be a
thinking?
blockade. Taiwan's single largest vulnerability is energy. So they are almost entirely dependent on imports for energy. So Communist China doesn't really need to invade. All they need to do is blockade the island and turn the lights off. They have, you heard the same figures, about a 2-week supply of natural gas
Here in
Taiwan.
Yeah.
So if they can maintain a blockade for a month, you've essentially shut this very prosperous island down. They're not going to be building their semiconductors. They're not going to be doing anything with AI. They're not going to be running air conditioning at this time of year when it's 90 degrees with 60% humidity. Vehicles aren't going to be running. Their high-speed rail isn't going to be running.
They're going to shut the country
A country
down.
runs on energy, and
Yeah.
it's a major vulnerability for them. So I think it is incumbent on the West, therefore, to help with this issue as much as we can. Now, coming from America and Canada, I was born in Canada, that means increasing our LNG exports to Taiwan, and then protecting those trade routes.
How would the international community respond to some kind of a blockade or some other kind of, act of aggression in that way?
Well, one would hope that the international community would come to Taiwan's aid. Now, obviously, without diplomatic recognition and no existing treaties, the whole Taiwan situation, especially vis-a-vis the United States, has been laboring under this strategic ambiguity for several decades now. That the United States has not and cannot really commit to a treaty with a country it doesn't have diplomatic relations with. So it can't outright say, yes, we will send the 7th Fleet if China does something. On the other hand, we do have the Taiwan Relations Act in the United States, which sort of kind of almost commits us to protecting their sovereignty to whatever that means, and providing some weapons. Ultimately, will they? I think yes. I think the United States and other Western nations will come to Taiwan's defense once they realize the importance, not just of the semiconductor industry, which is, of course, of critical importance to most of the world. 90% of the advanced semiconductors are made in this country. A great deal of global trade goes through the Taiwan Strait, which, of course, would be interrupted. but also because of the strategic importance. We will not be able to contain communist Chinese aggression in the Western Pacific without de facto independent Taiwan. And I would hope the United States government recognizes that.
Now, telling the story of what's behind the tensions and the history of the two would take many podcasts. But here's my newsroom colleague Sam Sachdeva with a very short explanation.
It dates back to the origins of China and the ancient Chinese dynasties, and they view reunification, they call it, or unification sometimes, as essential to the, China's great and glorious future. They say it is China and therefore it must be part of China. So I think it's as simple as that, really.
The people I talked to also said it's the geopolitics of it.
Yes, there is huge strategic value, and if you look at the Taiwanese economy and its strength, and in particular its semiconductor industry, that has a lot of geostrategic value as well. So there's a lot of practical reasons why China would like to have control of Taiwan beyond that sort of historical element.
Taiwan has also been at the UN calling for recognition, and in the week that I was there, the group of journalists were bussed from one ministry to a government agency to another government agency to the next ministry, and really the message over and over again was that it really wants international support, whether it's at the UN, whether it's the Global Aviation Authority or the World Health Organization. So what is New Zealand's stance in all of this?
Yeah, we are among a fairly large number of countries that follow the One China policy, it's called. So this is about acknowledging China's position that there's only one true Chinese government. For those of you who don't know, Taiwan's formal name is the Republic of China. So this is saying, yes, we understand the belief of Beijing, the People's Republic of China, that they are the true Chinese government, but it doesn't mean that we accept that it's true. Sometimes there's a little bit of conflation that goes on there. We're sort of saying, yes, we know that's your view, Beijing, but we don't necessarily agree with it. So we do have a representative office in Wellington. It's not an embassy, but it kind of functions like one. And that's, again, the sort of careful line that we walk. New Zealand ministers generally won't meet their Taiwanese counterparts or have much to do with them. There have been a few cross-party trips to Taiwan in recent years, but that's actually created a bit of a stir. You've had, the Chinese embassy saying this is jeopardising New Zealand-China relations. So it is a very testy area. So we kind of hedge our bets. We have been supportive of Taiwan having a role at the World Health Assembly and in other international organisations, but it's kind of the semantics around what are they called when they are there? Are they Taiwan or are they Taipei? That's where we're a little bit more careful, I suppose, of not alienating China or jeopardising our relationship with the Chinese government.
Because they're such an important trading partner.
Yeah, I think that is a huge part of it. They are our top trading partner. So I think it's probably the classic New Zealand pragmatic approach, right? Like if we can still have relationships with Taiwan, we have a trade deal with them, interestingly, doesn't matter whether we call them Taipei or Taiwan or whether we recognise them. Some will say, yes, it does matter and we should, but that's been the position that we've held for a long time, even before we had our trade deal with China, to be fair.
If there was a blockade or, signs of an invasion, would New Zealand get involved at all?
Well, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think it's one that successive governments have been very clear they don't want to answer. I recall Jacinda Ardern getting asked this question and really, dodging the question for understandable reasons, right? You don't want to pre-commit yourself to any war. And in fact, I think the Labour Party in opposition, now that the coalition government is in power, has wanted our government to rule out any such role for New Zealand. So I don't know that we, as a country, actually have a firm plan, to be honest, as to whether we would or not. I think there would be a lot of pressure that would come on us from the United States, from Australia, from our other partners, but then likewise from China, to stay out of it or to take their side. So, yeah, a big question and one that, I hope that we don't have to answer anytime soon.
So what is it like to live with the threat of war? One man on Taipei's old streets told me he would fight the invaders. A woman said she and her husband often debate which country they would escape to. Another said an invasion would never happen. In the city of Zhong, I meet New Zealander Mark Hansen, a journalist, and his friend Nellie, a teacher.
They don't want to talk about it. Seriously, it is we need to worry about our everyday, our daily life, the cost, the living cost, and then everything that need to being a human being in a society. And still we need to worry about politics. Too much. I thought it would be easier for our generation to have an open discussion, but not really.
Do you feel like you're living in China's shadow?
Well, this is a very hard question to answer. Yes and no. We all know this is a kind of an independence play. There's a Taiwan Straits between us, and we are protected by the government. But also, there are some invisible threats everywhere, the cyber attack and also cold fact news, anything. Yes, it happens to us every day in our lives. So.
How do you prepare, though? I mean, do you physically prepare? Because I know that you have quite big civil defence exercises.
It's like earthquake. We do have a lot of natural disaster, right? So it's like earthquake. You need to know when air raid sirens goes off, and then what you need to do, something like that.
But you do have that now, don't you?
We do have it, but only a small group of people really care about this, because most people, they don't want to see it, or they don't believe that will happen, and it's kind of a little taboo for people to stop preparing it, because you're kind of believing it's going to happen someday, and it's kind of scary.
How do you prepare? I mean, do you go into the basement of your building? What do you do?
We do have that Ming-Shih. How do you
The government organises air raid drills, but it used to be that when the sirens went off, you had to pull off the side of the road and go into a 7-Eleven or something and just wait for it to finish. But now they're doing it more strictly. You need to go to a designated shelter when the drill goes off.
So this is a new thing?
The air raid drills are not new, but they're stepping it up.
Mm-hmm.
I think particularly the war in Ukraine changed the way that Taiwanese think about a potential invasion, and people began doing a lot more preparation. I know some nurses in their spare time, will attend training courses on how to dress bullet wounds and things like this.
How would you describe the mood of your friends and people of Taiwan in general?
Taiwanese people will complain to me a lot that they get tired of being asked this, and that it becomes repetitive. I think part of that is just frustration, because it's such an intractable problem and there's no solution to it. And so it can leave you feeling despondent. People don't worry about an invasion being imminent. They don't talk about anything drastic happening in the next few years. But sometimes you're talking to someone, and I've encountered this a number of times, and you hit upon a subject that's dealing with long-term plans. It might be retirement or family things. And I always see the person pause for a moment, kind of do a double take, reflect, and then they will say something like, well, we'll just have to see. It's so the long-term picture, I think, people are not particularly optimistic about.
You've got a choice. You don't have to be here. You don't have to face those questions. So why are you still here?
I love it here. Despite this overhanging threat, Taiwan is just an incredibly safe, relaxed, easygoing place. I really enjoy my life here. It's also meaningful because there's an important struggle here. There's a struggle for independence and democracy. It's interesting to be here and watching that on the ground and to be a part of it.
I sent a list of questions to the Chinese embassy in Wellington, but I've not received a reply. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and NZ On Air. This podcast was produced by Gwen McClure and engineered by Alex Harmer. Thanks to everyone in Taiwan who spoke to me or helped with this podcast. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. Ka kite.